The Majingalanes weren't just lions, they were strategists, and some say they were even more ruthless than the Mapogos. Is that so? Today you'll learn the true story of this legendary coalition, from their first steps to their final fall. We'll explore the fights, the sacrificed cubs, the merciless strategies, and the internal conflicts that put 5 brothers at the top of the food chain. And yes, you'll find out why many still consider them the smartest and most relentless kings Sabi Sand has ever seen. In the heart of southern Africa, an unlikely coalition was forming in the vast landscapes of the Sabi Sand Reserve. 5 young male lions, born around 2004, decided to join forces in a rare and deeply strategic move. This union, in a world ruled by brutal rivalries, represented a break from the traditional behavior of these big cats. Coalitions with more than 3 males are extremely uncommon, but these 5, Dark Mane, Golden, Scar, House, and Hip Hop, were destined to change the course of history. United, they challenged the balance of power in one of the most contested regions of Kruger. And from this alliance was born one of the most feared empires among lions, the Majingalanes. Different in appearance and personality, each member of the coalition played a key role. Dark Mane, with his dark, thick mane, projected authority. Golden was the picture of majesty. Scar, with his wary gaze, revealed sharp instincts. House and Hip Hop completed the group with strength and resilience. Together they developed a harmony that defied the logic of the jungle. Their movements were precisely coordinated. Like a military unit on constant patrol, the 5 lions advanced through the fields of Sabi Sand with a clear objective: to establish absolute territorial dominance. A new pattern of coalition was emerging before everyone's eyes. The statistics are impressive. 5 lions, simultaneously controlling 5 different prides, something practically unheard of in the region's recorded history. This territorial dominance gave them constant access to fertile females and abundant game. For years, the nights in Sabi Sand were marked by synchronized roars, echoing as reminders of the Majingalanes' presence. The boundaries of the territory were maintained with regular patrols, always with intelligence and calculation. They knew every tree, every stream, every scent that indicated a threat. The coalition acted as a single organism, reacting quickly to any sign of invasion. Their alliance wasn't just based on physical strength, but on a survival strategy. The Majingalanes developed a system of dominance that involved splitting up to cover larger areas and regrouping only when necessary. This adaptability was one of their greatest weapons. No other group of males had shown such effectiveness in maintaining such a vast and well-coordinated power network. This new order challenged not only their rivals but also the established ideas about lion behavior. The coalition became an ecological phenomenon, observed with fascination by scholars and with fear by the entire animal kingdom around them. However, the rise of the Majingalanes was accompanied by a brutal policy. To secure their lineage, they exterminated at least 34 cubs from previous coalitions. This practice, as shocking as it may seem, is common among lions. But the high number reinforces the relentless breeding strategy they adopted. By eliminating the offspring of other males, they ensured that only their genes were passed on. The future of Sabi Sand, for a time, would be shaped exclusively by their heirs. Domination wasn't just physical, it was genetic. New blood flowed through the prides, now under the reign of the 5. Still, no dominion remains untouched for long. On the same land that now bore the marks of the Majingalanes, old forces began to stir. The territory they conquered was once home to other kings, among them, a legendary group that wouldn't go down without a fight. With the advance of the new coalition, an inevitable tension also arose. The next chapter of this story would be written not only with roars, but with blood. The silence of the savannah was broken by a roar that would echo for a generation. When the Majingalanes decided to challenge the legendary Mapogos, what was at stake wasn't just territory. It was the very natural order of Sabi Sand. The Mapogos, until then considered invincible, had ruled with an iron fist for almost a decade. They were more than lions. They were a living legend, feared for their brutality, and respected for their unity. The rivalry between the coalitions became inevitable as the young Majingilanes approached the limits of their domain. The winds of change whispered among the acacias. And then came the confrontation. The initial battle wasn't witnessed by humans. What was known came from the clues left by dawn: tufts of fur, marks on the ground, and at the center of it all, the body of a Mapogo. The first fall was sudden. The Majingilanes didn't wait. They attacked with precision and fury, exploiting their numerical advantage and youth. They surprised one of the isolated veterans, and in a few minutes, the balance was destroyed. This act, calculated and decisive, marked the beginning of a new era. The coalition that for years ruled with iron fists now faced decline before new, younger, and more voracious enemies. But the Majingilanes weren't satisfied. With the death of the first Mapogo, the message wasn't clear enough yet. They knew they needed to go further to completely assume the throne. And it was on a moonless night that they sealed the fate of the second veteran. The nighttime attack was strategic, taking advantage of the prey's vulnerability during sleep and the darkness as an ally. With almost ghostly speed, they located and killed the second Mapogo, finally breaking the backbone of that old coalition. The takeover was irreversible. The stars, silent witnesses of the savannah, saw the birth of a new reign. The effect of this offensive was immediate. Entire prides, once under Mapogo rule, began to scatter or accept the new leadership. The females, reluctant at first, soon realized that resisting would be pointless. The Majingilane domination was meticulously imposed, both by force and by the frequency of their patrols. The roars now came from different voices, but with equal or even greater intensity. The conquered territories began to display new marking patterns, patrol trails, and hunting habits. The exchange of power, although violent, was also highly strategic. The Majingilane knew how to solidify a conquest. And like every seizure of power, it came with its marks. The scars left by the battles were visible both on the bodies of the survivors and in the social structure of the region. The remaining Mapogos retreated, scattering or disappearing. Some still tried to resist, but they no longer had the same strength or unity. The rivalry between the two coalitions became a legend told in tracks, noises, and suspicious glances between the lions. The savannah, which once belonged to the Mapogos, now answered to other lords. The fall of these icons created a void that would be filled with discipline and a new form of command. However, consolidating power is just the beginning. By taking the place of the Mapogos, the Majingilane inherited not only territory and females, they also inherited the challenges of the throne. Maintaining such a large alliance required more than victories in combat, and while the roars of conquest still echoed, a new phase was approaching. A phase that would require even more difficult decisions, and even more ruthless strategies. When the Majingilane took control of the territories formerly ruled by the Mapogos, there was no time for celebrations. Nature does not reward momentary glory, only genetic continuity. To ensure their domination, the coalition adopted a brutal yet instinctive tactic: eliminate all the surviving cubs born from previous leaders. In a few days, 34 cubs were killed. Each small body represented a threat to the lineage of the new kings. The scene was devastating for the females, but inevitable given the wild logic of reproduction. This ruthless cleansing paved the way for the next step. With the cubs eliminated, the females went into heat, biologically forced to seek new reproductive partners. The Majingilane then assumed the leadership positions of the conquered prides, and reproduction began almost immediately. Scar, Golden, and Dark Mane were the first to mate with the females, imposing their legacy with tooth and claw. Every birth from then on would mark the genetic consolidation of the coalition. The constant patrolling of the territories ensured that no other male approached the new mothers. It was a clear strategy: eliminate the past, control the present, perpetuate the future. This breeding phase wasn't just fast, it was coordinated. House and hip-hop kept watch while the more dominant brothers mated. There was an invisible hierarchy in the way each one acted, but the coalition functioned like a precise gear. It was a dance between protection and possession. The alliance at that moment seemed invincible. The lions spread across 5 distinct prides within the Sabi Sand region, consolidating a network of domination rarely seen before. The numbers don't lie: 5 lions, 5 prides, dozens of females under control. The reign was just beginning. The Majingilanes' genetic impact became evident over time. Strong, active cubs, marked by their parents' natural aggression, began to emerge in the first few seasons that followed. The females, even those who had resisted at first, now surrendered to the new cycle of life. The boundaries of the territory grew, pushing rivals into more remote areas. With each litter, the coalition expanded not only its pride, but also its influence. It was a combination of combat, strategy, and reproduction that was rarely seen on such a scale. The territory became a living empire, marked by genes and roars. However, growth brought its own risks. The number of offspring required constant protection. Lone invaders, attracted by the momentary absence of some members during patrols, tested the limits of the coalition. But the Majingilan were always alert. They knew that the slightest carelessness could mean the end of an entire lineage. The strategy, once offensive, also became defensive. And so, every battle fought around the cubs was a reaffirmation of power. The pride was more than a group, it was a dynasty under construction. And even with the lineage's success secured, new threats were on the way. Other coalitions were growing in the shadows, watching, waiting, learning. Within the Majingilane alliance itself, tensions were beginning to rise. The instinct that united them now fueled individual desires, and in a system where strength decides everything, loyalty can be as fragile as the breeze that crosses the savannah at dusk. With their families settled and their young ones safe, the Majingilane had to keep their land clear of danger. But unlike the hot-headed roughhousing of other groups, these 5 lions came up with a way of watching over their land and taking out threats that amazed even the folks who'd seen it all. They didn't just hunt, they planned it all out. They knew when to hold back, where to pounce, and how to spread out their warriors to catch their enemies off guard. It was like they were taking over the land with the skill of a medicine man. Fighting wasn't just about strength anymore, it was about smarts too. Out on the Sabi-San savannah, a new way of hunting, a real clever way, was born. The Majingilanes' way of ambushing was something to see. They'd lay their traps, patient as the wisest elders. Made the whole land a place of fear and respect. Their rule wasn't just about being strong, but about being clever like no other. Lone wolves, young bucks, and even small bands would try to slip through the edges of the territory, but more often than not, they'd run into a trap. The Majingilane learned the ways of the trespassers, kept watch at the watering holes, and would split into smaller groups to surround and cut off their targets. It was common for them to wait for the time when the females went out to hunt, leaving the pride vulnerable to lure the rivals in. And when they attacked, they did it with coordinated fury. No wasted roar, no wasted energy. Every fight was a statement: this land is taken. Golden and Scar were often the first ones to jump into the fight. Dark Mane, the strongest of the bunch, stayed back, making sure nothing got away. Hip Hop and House would circle around, usually finishing the job quick and clean. These lions, they moved like one big animal with 5 parts. Every time they won, they'd mark the ground with claws and blood, and they'd leave their mark on anyone who thought about coming close. This wasn't just about fighting, it was about keeping everyone scared, about being known as the toughest around. The Majingilanes' power went beyond just their strength. Just knowing about them could make any rival tremble. Every roar, every move they made together showed how powerful they were. The mental scares they gave their enemies were just as bad as any real hurt. They built their group on fear and respect, and they knew how to use that fear just like they used their claws and teeth. Some rivals didn't even get to the point of fighting. Just hearing the echo of the Majingilanes' roars altogether was enough to make many turn tail. Just them being there was enough to make others uneasy, a living reminder of how strong they were. Their reputation was a powerful weapon they used wisely, making sure they stayed on top without even having to fight. There was something about the way they patrolled the land that made any careful watcher feel uneasy. It was like they knew what the trespassers would do before they even did it. And the numbers back this up. During their reign, the Majingilanes took out a whole bunch of rivals without even a straight-up fight. They knew when they didn't need to fight, and that smart thinking out on the plains was a weapon just as strong as their sharp claws. But not every fight was clean. Sometimes the enemy fought back hard, and the marks of these battles stayed on the Majingilan. Scars on Scar, deep wounds on Golden, a messed up paw on House. Every mark told a story. Even hurt, these lions, they still held their heads high. They took turns keeping watch, made sure the little ones were safe, and reminded everyone where their land ended. The whole pride knew sticking together was the only way to keep their family strong. You see, things start to fall apart when the fear ain't walking beside them no more. And as the days went by and the scraps got more and more common, something new started to grow inside the coalition itself. With so many battles won and land held tight, the need to just live was giving way to a different kind of hunger, the hunger to stand tall even among kin. The signs were still small, like whispers on the wind, but soon the Majingilan would turn their eyes from the outside world. The next battle, quiet as a stalking cat, was getting ready to be born inside their own pride. Strong as it looked, the Majingilan coalition wasn't immune to the cracks of power. United for years in battles against outsiders, the five lions started showing signs of tension within. As they got older and the scars piled up, the hunger for full leadership grew among them. The great bond between the lions, it starts to fray. Like a rope worn thin, it's about to break. It wasn't enough to just run the prides or spread out their land. Now they were fighting for their own place in the circle, a quiet war between brothers in blood and battle. The spirit of working together was still there, but it was starting to get crowded out by ambition. And that balance, delicate like the quiet before a big storm, was about to get blown away. Golden, standing tall, started making decisions on his own during patrols. Darkmane, always respected for his strength, started answering back with warning roars, not at outsiders, but at his own brothers. Little scuffles started happening all the time, not big fights mind you, but shoving, looking at each other sideways, sneaky moves while they were hunting. That strong bond between them, it wasn't so strong anymore. Little by little, they started showing their true colors. Even the best partnerships, even between brothers, can fall apart. In the lion's world, everything changes, nothing stays the same. The watchers saw that Hip-Hop, the quickest of the five, kept his distance. He'd rather walk away when things got heated, letting Golden and Scar settle their own dust. House, always a quiet one, started wandering off on his own, gone for long stretches. It was a clear sign the band was breaking apart. Their patrol, once tight like a war dance, now looked all spread out and clumsy. Even so, each one kept up a strong front. See, their prey, cubs, and rival lions, they were still scared of those Majingilane roars. The strategy, once a tribe thing, now becomes every lion for themselves. Golden chose to watch over a certain part of the land. He kept to himself around the other lions and lionesses who liked having him around. Darkmane did the same on the other side of the land. The pride was starting to break up into different areas. It was like a bunch of little kingdoms inside one big kingdom. A shaky arrangement barely holding on by a thread. They still fought together against outsiders, but the way they worked together, the spirit of the group, just wasn't the same as back in the early days in Sabi Sand. Even amidst the tension, the Majingalanes' reputation remained untarnished. The numbers were still in their favor. They still dominated 5 different prides, and no rival group could establish themselves for long. But internally, their decline was unfolding subtly and cruelly, like a tree rotting from the inside out. The strength that once came from their alliance now had to be balanced with the competition for control. There wasn't room for 5 leaders on the same throne, and the savannah would extract a heavy price for this division. As the heat of internal disputes grew, another factor began to weigh even more heavily on each step of the Majingalanes, something no fight could prevent, and no strategy could reverse. A silent enemy which all kings sooner or later must face. Old age, and with it the inevitable physical and mental decline of each lion in the coalition. The cycle of life on the savannah spares not even the most feared. As the years went by, the Majingalanes began to feel the weight of age. Their muscles no longer responded as they once did, and the long night patrols became exhausting. Each fight left deeper marks and wounds took longer to heal. The pride, which once paraded through the territory with majesty, now showed signs of fragility. The coalition of 5 began to dwindle in presence and strength. The Sabi Sand, which once trembled under the roars of these lions, now echoed other sounds, the whispers of succession. Darkmane was one of the first to disappear. His body could no longer keep up with the pace of the patrols, and, isolated, he succumbed to his accumulated wounds. Scar, even combative, faced increasing difficulties protecting his females and cubs from young pretenders. The territory, once vast and controlled with strategic precision, began to fragment. their domination was no longer absolute. Small groups of solitary lions dared to enter previously forbidden zones, testing the limits of the MAJINGILANES' resistance, and so, the balance of power began to shift. Golden, who once led decisive attacks against the Mapogos, began to wander alone. The fur around his face was thinner, his eyes duller. That haughty posture still resisted, but time was merciless. House disappeared without a trace, perhaps killed by young rivals, perhaps defeated by his own body. Hip-Hop, with his notorious speed, was the last to resist with vigor. But even he had to give in. There was no longer a coalition, just memories of a strategy that shaped the destiny of an entire generation of lions. With the fall of the MAJINGILANES, the once protected cubs became targets. Lions from other regions, alert to the opening, advanced on the prides. What was once safe territory became a zone of constant conflict. The legacies left by the five were at risk. Without the firm and constant patrol of the coalition, the Sabi Sand once again became a stage for unpredictable battles. And for every new roar that arose on the horizon, there was always the shadow of those who came before, lions who defied all odds. And so, the echo left by the MAJINGILANES still reverberates in the tall grass and in the attentive eyes of the young lions who watch the horizon. Because every rise, however grand, carries between the lines the whisper of an inevitable decline. But what happens after the fall of the greatest kings of the savannah? That's a story that is still being written. Now tell me, after knowing this story, do you still think the title of King of the Jungle is just a matter of strength? Or is it, in the end, strategy that really decides who survives and who disappears into the dust of time? If the MAJINGILANES defeated the Mapogos, who do you think will defeat the MAJINGILANES? Do you believe any coalition could repeat this feat? Or do you think their decline shows that no empire lasts forever? Comment below what surprised you most in this story, and which of these lions you think was the true mastermind behind the domination. Oh, and if you enjoyed this type of content, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and come with us to explore other amazing stories like this. The wild world is full of secrets. And this was just the beginning. 5 MAJINGILANES had conquered 5 distinct prides. They rewrote the rules of the savannah with an almost unprecedented domination. During their rise, 34 cubs were killed to secure their own lineage. Names like Golden, Dark Mane, Scar, House, and Hip-Hop became legends in their lifetime, and later, myths of the wild. But as great as their legacy was, no throne is eternal. Nature, relentless in its cycles, keeps turning.